The sun had barely risen over the towering skyline of Chicago when Jonathan Whitmore, a self-made millionaire, noticed something unusual. His usually immaculate home was quieter than normal. The faint smell of fresh coffee lingered, but the warmth and hum of his household, the subtle movement of someone bustling about, were missing. It was not in Jonathan's nature to be worried over trivial matters. After all, his life was meticulously scheduled, his days filled with board meetings, charity events, and investments. But today was different. Today he felt a gnawing unease that refused to be ignored. His housekeeper, Martha, a kind and gentle woman who had worked for him for nearly 10 years, had missed work without warning. Jonathan prided himself on treating his staff with respect and fairness, but the thought of Martha being absent all day tugged at his conscience. She was more than just a housekeeper. Over the years, she had become part of the household's quiet rhythm, a presence so comforting he rarely noticed how essential she had become. He poured himself a cup of coffee, stared out the enormous glass windows at the city below, and decided he couldn't let it go. He needed to know why she hadn't shown up. And so, Jonathan did something he rarely did. He picked up his car keys and drove to the modest neighborhood where Martha lived. The streets were lined with small, aging houses, a stark contrast to Jonathan's sleek glass mansion. He pulled up to a quaint, weathered home and knocked gently on the door. No one answered at first. Heart hammering in his chest, Jonathan pushed the door open slightly and peered inside. The living room was dim, the air heavy with a mix of dust and the faint scent of baked bread. It was then he noticed a small, worn calendar pinned to the wall, dates marked with meticulous precision. Among them were notes about bills, doctor appointments, and grocery lists. And then he heard a faint sound, a soft, labored cough from the bedroom. Jonathan stepped inside, his expensive leather shoes silent on the threadbare carpet. There he found Martha, lying weakly on a narrow bed, her frail hands clutching a faded quilt. Her face, usually vibrant and full of warmth, was pale, etched with pain and exhaustion. Beside her, a small boy, no more than 7 years old, sat quietly on the floor, flipping through a worn-out picture book. Jonathan's heart clenched as he realized this was the reason for her absence. Martha had been caring for her sick son, who had been battling a chronic illness for months. She had been struggling alone, hiding her hardships to avoid burdening anyone, including Jonathan. The weight of the discovery hit Jonathan harder than he expected. In his world of endless wealth, luxury cars, and grand parties, he had been blind to the quiet suffering happening just a few miles away from his mansion. Martha had never asked for help, had never complained, yet here she was, a woman of extraordinary resilience, shouldering a responsibility that would break the spirit of anyone else. Jonathan felt tears prick his eyes, a rare vulnerability he rarely allowed himself to feel. He sat down beside her, his usual composed demeanor dissolving into quiet empathy. Martha tried to smile, brushing away the worry he saw in his eyes, but he could see through it. "I didn't want you to worry," she whispered. Jonathan gently shook his head, realizing that she had been carrying a burden too heavy for one person. In that moment he made a silent promise to himself. He would not let her or her son struggle alone ever again. Over the next few weeks, Jonathan quietly arranged for medical care for Martha's son, ensuring he received the treatment he desperately needed. He hired additional help in Martha's household so she could rest and recover without guilt. Slowly, the warmth returned to her face, the spark of hope igniting in her eyes. For Jonathan, it was more than just providing assistance. It was an awakening to the unseen. Struggles around him. He had spent years chasing success, yet it was compassion, understanding, and genuine human connection that left the deepest impact on his soul. One afternoon, as they sat together in the small backyard, Jonathan watched Martha laughing with her son, the sound like music in the quiet neighborhood. It was a stark contrast to the lonely, silent mansion he had returned to each day, a mansion that suddenly felt empty despite its grandeur. He realized that wealth could buy comfort, power, and influence, but it could not buy the kind of fulfillment that came from helping someone simply because they needed it. The simple acts of kindness, the quiet gestures of support, were worth far more than any fortune he had amassed. Jonathan's experience with Martha changed him profoundly. He began to look at his world differently, not just the people in his home, but the city around him, the community he often overlooked. He started visiting hospitals, shelters, and schools. seeking out stories like Martha's, offering assistance without expectation or recognition. He understood now that life's true measure was not the size of one's bank account, but the depth of one's heart, the willingness to see and act on the suffering of others. For Martha, the changes were life-altering. She no longer felt the crushing weight of responsibility alone, and her son began to recover with proper care and attention. Their lives, once overshadowed by fear and struggle, slowly transformed into a space filled with hope, security, and joy. And yet for Jonathan, the greatest transformation was within himself. He discovered that sometimes the smallest act of noticing, simply asking why someone is missing work, could uncover a world of hidden pain, and in reaching out, he had found a connection far more meaningful than any business deal or luxury acquisition. As the sun set over Chicago, casting golden light over the city, Jonathan and Martha walked through the quiet streets, a bond forged through compassion and understanding. Jonathan knew that the world could be harsh and unfeeling, but he also knew that moments like this, moments where someone's pain is acknowledged and met with kindness, could heal wounds that money alone could never touch. If this story of compassion and second chances moved you, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to the channel to celebrate the power of kindness. Your engagement helps spread stories that remind us all of the goodness that still exists in the world. Weeks turned into months, and Martha and her son flourished in ways they had never imagined possible. Jonathan often reflected on that morning when he had chosen to step outside his perfectly scheduled life and notice someone in need. It had been a small action with enormous consequences. He had learned that every person carries unseen battles, and that sometimes showing care and understanding could be life-changing. Before we reach the end, I'd love for you to comment below and share your thoughts. Have you ever witnessed or experienced an act of kindness that changed your life? And as you watch Martha and her son laughing under the gentle glow of a street lamp, and Jonathan standing quietly beside them, you realize the depth of human compassion. Money, influence, and status pale in comparison to the bonds formed through empathy and care. Jonathan's story is not just about charity. It's a lesson about noticing, understanding, and acting with a heart wide open. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to engage with this video. Like, comment, and share it, because every story of kindness has the power to inspire someone today.